Pucks with Haggs is powered by PrizePicks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network.
Welcome to another edition of the Pucks with Haggs podcast. I think this is like the 71st episode, I want to say, of the Pucks with Haggs podcast. Brought to you by PrizePicks, the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America and the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Instead of battling thousands of other players that could be pros or sharks, you simply pick more or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll right in. It's fun and pretty simple. Download the PrizePicks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy with Pucks with Haggs, powered by PrizePicks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network. With me today, I have Evan Marinofsky from the New England Hockey Journal. You may have also seen his smiling face. I don't think he has the glasses, though, when he's on NESN hosting the New England Hockey Journal show. He's looking very professorial right now. We appreciate that in this early morning podcast. Evan, how's it going?
It's good. It's good. Yeah. Sometimes I keep the glasses on, and I like wearing glasses sometimes. Better on the eye, easier on the eyes than contacts. So
yes,
I can't complain.
No, I can understand it because I've never gone through the contact lens thing, so I don't know how much of a pain in the ass that is, but I'm sure it is. I've dated girls that had contact lenses, and I remember them always complaining about it, especially if they slept them in them overnight and all that stuff.
Yep.
So I know the difficulties that come with the glasses and the contact lenses, but I think it garners immediate respect. I immediately respect you 100 times more right now with the glasses on, Evan. It instantly draws that, I think.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. It adds 3 or 4 years to my face. So instead of
really
looking 15 years old, I look like about 18 or 19. So that's good.
Yeah, you look like early college student Evan Marinofsky right now. All right, let's get right into it. Bruins, I haven't done a podcast since the trade deadline, so we will get into that for sure. But just first of all, 5-1 win over the Pittsburgh Penguins. On the one hand, no shows for Evgeny Malkin, Sidney Crosby in that game. It looked like, Crosby was pissed about Jake Guentzel getting traded away from the Penguins to the Carolina Hurricanes. Clearly, when he talked to the media, he was not happy about it. I almost felt like this game felt like a little one-game protest from Pittsburgh's best.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That they were upset about being sellers. So, they kind of handed this one to the Bruins to a degree, especially after the first period when they had 14 shots on net and Ullmark was really good, making all the saves. And then, the offense got entracked. But 5 goals in the last, 3 or 4 games for Pavel Zacha, who was really starting to catch fire offensively after going through a very long quiet period. Maybe it's a boost of confidence to him to know that they're not trading for a frontline center and they believe in him and they believe in Charlie Coyle. But you got goals from a bunch of your best players. Brad Marchand gets goal number 399 of his career. David Pastrnak hits the 40-goal mark. It was just kind of a feel-good win for the Bruins yesterday while also doing that fun Big City Greens classic thing. Animated over on Disney XD, which Finn actually enjoyed quite a bit because he loves the Big City Greens.
I actually watched a little bit of that because I'm curious how they do this. I always find
it's really cool.
They did the Super Bowl with SpongeBob, right?
Yes.
I think that was what they did. So we would kind of flip over just to see that. I think it's cool. I said this to my mom yesterday. I was like, if they had this when I was a kid for, I don't know what cartoon it would have been back then, but it would have been awesome. I would have picked it up. I would have loved it. But yeah, yesterday was a feel-good win. I mean, you look at and I think it's an interesting thing, and we'll kind of hit on the deadline. But they didn't do anything drastic. They didn't trade Ullmark, even though there's reports out there they tried to. They didn't trade DeBrusk. They didn't add another top 6 center. So you wonder if the short-term impact is you get a boost from Jake DeBrusk, who looked pretty good yesterday, and Pavel Zacha and Charlie Coyle, and Linus Ullmark, who looked great yesterday, and everyone saw the hug at the end, and Swayman was kind of talking to Ullmark. He talked about it after, obviously. And you wonder if, they're kind of now on a mission, hey, let's prove our front office wrong. This is the real last dance. The real last dance was not Bergeron and Krejci. It was probably the last year of Ullmark and Swayman together. And you just wonder if that had the desired effect. Now, is that going to win them, multiple playoff series? I don't think we're ready to say that yet. But I am curious to see, because they have played well the last 4 games. I wonder if they do start to kind of catch fire. And I think, like you mentioned, Zacha with 5 goals in the last 4, coming off a really rough stretch. I think that's kind of them. Like, I think, those guys like Zacha and even a little bit of Coyle and Frederick and DeBrusque, these guys are, I don't know if you can count on them for production every night, but when they're going, they're going. And I think, you saw that from the Christmas break to the All-Star break where they were just firing. And then after that,
and the Bruins usually win when they get secondary scoring from those guys.
Oh,
that's what happens is those guys chip in, and all of a sudden the Bruins score 3, 4, 5 goals in a game and they win. Like that's how important they are to the whole thing.
Yeah, and I also liked. I think it was it Martian after the game who said, we're a defense first team. We got to realize that. And I think that's what they are. I mean, especially after the deadline, they did not add Lindholm. They added Maroon and Peeke, and those are depth adds. And Lord knows if those guys will even equal 5 combined points by the end of the season.
Yeah.
But to me, like, they're a defense first team. Their strength is in net. They've got to utilize it. They've got to protect it well. They got to protect the house, as you tell Finn in the Pee-wees. Or is he a squirt?
Squirt. Yeah, he'll be a Pee-wee next year.
Got to protect the house.
I'm still more working with them on the wings, actually, like going out beyond the dots and being ready for passes to get it out of our zone. Because right now they protect the house almost too much, where they all collapse on the net and there's 5 kids there and no outlet for anybody to get out of the zone.
Yeah, I can imagine. I remember those days. But yeah, I mean, I do think that, they're a defense first team. And I think that combined with, now it's like, all right, this is the group we have going forward. It wouldn't surprise me if they kept kind of up on this little hot streak they have going on.
No, and, part of it is just like the schedule and them like, they took, let's face it, they took a powder after the All-Star break. They were still on vacation for a while. They were not playing hard. I think they got, caught up in the standings, not having the intensity level where it needed to be with other teams that were fighting for playoff spots. It was very obvious to me for about a month they just weren't up to the level that everybody else was, and needed to sort of figure that out and get that right. And I think they have. I think seeing Florida pass them, I think them playing kind of mediocre hockey for a month, blowing a few more third period leads. I think all that stuff with the trade deadline coming kind of snapped them out of it. And what we've seen over the last, handful of games is them allowing 1 goal a game during regulation to really good offensive teams, to Toronto, to Edmonton, to Pittsburgh. They've started locking down the defense. The forwards have started working with the defense as far as 5-man unit defensively out there, back checking, making good decisions with the puck, all that stuff. Like you're starting to see a lot of that more consistently, a lot less odd man rushes, breakaways, like mistakes like that too. So to a degree, they are a defense first team because they're built on goaltending. But I thought it was also interesting when I asked Don Sweeney about the blown third period leads and what he thought about them. And what the reasons were behind them. And one of the things is the other side of the flipping of the other side of the coin, where part of the reason they're blowing so many leads is because they don't have a big enough lead, because they're not extending. Mm-hmm. It's always a 1-goal lead in the third period. And part of it comes down to the offense too, and getting the secondary offense and, doing what they did yesterday where they had a smaller lead and then they poured it on in the third period, added a couple more and really ran away from the Penguins after scoring 3 goals in the second period. So, I think that is a big element to it too, is making sure you're getting enough offense where it's not constantly white knuckle third periods where you're trying to hang on to a 1-goal lead, because you're going to blow, some of those, just the percentages say that. The Bruins have done that to, I think, a much bigger degree than they would like. And, they're almost getting towards a record, I think, for overtime and shootout losses this year, NHL record, which is crazy that they're even in that territory. But it speaks to just how they haven't had enough offense to separate from teams, how they have had some, problems holding on to leads and some issues in the third period. And the other thing Sweeney talked about too is he absolutely name-checked Patrice Bergeron, and it spoke to how much they miss him in those situations where he played in every single one of those situations. He was always on the ice in those situations and brought a calming presence, won face-offs, did a lot of little things detail-wise that helped them protect those leads and get out of them. Now, there's also a Zdeno Chara element to that too. They had him for a long time, and that's why it always felt like third period leads were lockdowns, is because when you have like a towering, menacing, huge defenseman in front of the net, that also helps you protect the lead when things get chaotic and the melee happens in front of the net, and they don't really have that guy anymore on the back end. But
they got Andrew Peeke. They got Andrew Peeke.
They do have bring him on board. The Pucks with Haggs podcast is powered by Prize Picks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network. Football season may be over, but the action on the floor is heating up, whether it's the tournament season or the fight for playoff home court. It goes beyond the hockey that we're talking about. We're talking about basketball as well. There's no shortage of high-stakes basketball moments this time of year. Get in on the excitement with Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app, where you can turn your hoops knowledge into some serious cash. And what better way to also pick players and go more or less than with some of the celebrity Prize Picks favorite players like Meek Mill and Sugar Sean O'Malley. You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries from some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. The app is easy to download, so download that Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. That's downloading the Prize Pick app and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. We'll get into actually the trade deadline stuff now. I trust the Bruins NHL scouting staff, the advanced scouts, the guys that watch these players and see something that we don't necessarily see, or that the pocket protector brigade that whips out the bar graphs on these stay-at-home defensemen to try to trash them and say that they're terrible, the things that they don't see. Because clearly they don't see things when they have not even seen a player play, and they just whip out all these fancy stats and say, this guy's terrible because,
I agree with you on that.
Blue bar graph only goes halfway up in this category. Like, give me a break. Parker Weatherspoon, Jesper Boquist, Danton Heinen, Justin Brazeau,
Brandon Carlo.
Yeah, there's a ton of these players where they've played for other teams. The NHL scouts for the Bruins and the AHL scouts for the Bruins have seen these players, and they identify players that will play well in the Bruins system that they think can flourish in the. Bruins
I thought you were. I don't mean to. I thought you meant players that have lower.
No.
Analytics.
Yeah, I just wanted to rip the fancy stats people for a second there. That was a little tangent.
I had to interrupt.
Yes, but no, I think have a lot of faith now after the last few years of all of the players that they've brought in that have been landlocked in another organization, have been stuck somewhere or didn't look like they were much. And I had people come up to me and tell me, I saw Parker Weatherspoon play a bunch of times in the AHL, and I just thought he was another guy. I was not impressed with him. And then he comes to the Bruins and he wins an NHL spot. He's got a contract for next year now after the deadline. So I have a lot of faith now that the Bruins are very good at identifying these players from other organizations that they think will be good fits here and that they think will be good players here. Even a guy like Andrew Peeke, who has been a healthy scratch a lot this year, who played a ton the previous 2 years, played 162 of 164 games, played a lot of minutes. Obviously not an offensive defenseman, but a big, strong right shot, stay-at-home guy, kills penalties, block shots, all that stuff. They obviously see something in him, even though he's a career -60 and he had some rough years with bad Columbus teams. They see something in him that they think he's going to be able to come here and essentially be a replacement for Derek Forbort, who is gone. He's season-ending injury. He's going to need surgery. He's not coming back. So this is a guy they brought in for a little bit less salary cap hit-wise and is basically going to play the same role at 25 years old, a younger version of him. And I'm willing to be patient and give them the benefit of the doubt that they've seen something in Peeke that is going to be able to get the job done both now and in the future for the Bruins. And obviously, we know we can get to Pat Maroon later, but Peeke interests me because I feel like the Bruins must see something in him that they liked, that they think is going to be a good fit here.
I felt the same way. I think, obviously when you look at the package or you look at what went to Columbus, obviously Zboril hasn't worked out here. That makes sense.
Yeah.
The 2027 third, it's a couple of years away, but that's a fairly high pick.
Yep.
And then you have, you're taking on the $2.75 million in cap. And I think, most people's initial reaction are like, are you serious? But I agree with you. I think that, they have been good at identifying talent that other people have not been able to identify when it comes to NHL players. And if they're giving up a third and eating that salary, they must see something. They must see something. I mean, and again, I have not watched a lot of Andrew Peeke. I'm going to guess you haven't. I'm going to guess a lot of Bruins fans have not seen much of Andrew Peeke.
The only time I ever noticed him was when Brad Marchand knocked him out of a game with a nasty hit along the boards. He kind of gave him a little elbow into the glass and knocked him out of a game against Columbus.
Yeah, and again, so, and it's interesting. I think Peeke, it's an interesting thing because Peeke was a former second-round pick. It doesn't mean everything, but at some point, someone saw. I mean, hey, for instance, I said this to Diver the other day on the live Bruins beat we did. There was a kid at Dexter last year, Sean Cohen, 6'4".
Yeah, I remember him.
Smooth skater.
I saw him play a couple years ago. Yep.
Yeah, good player. And he went in the 6th round to Buffalo. Now, partially that was because he stayed in prep and he was injured and his numbers weren't great. But still, even as a smooth skating, big kind of shutdown defenseman, went in the 6th round. Now, I think Peeke was actually at Selects Academy when he was, prior to going, I think, to the USHL. I could be wrong, or prior to college and all that stuff. And he was picked in the 2nd round, and you wonder if, again, I don't remember this at the time, but was he looked at as someone maybe with an offensive upside? Now, it clearly looks like that hasn't even been touched in Columbus. Right. But I do wonder if the Bruins see something, because this is one of those instances where they clearly didn't want to give up a lot of assets at this deadline, future-wise, right?
They couldn't.
They didn't really have them, and they're not going to compete with teams. But you do wonder, they hold all their prospects, they hold all but one of their draft picks, and this is the deal they put the draft pick on. So you do wonder if they, this kind of hits at what you were saying, where they see something, and I trust them. Now, the one thing is, if it doesn't work out, if Peeke is a complete bust and a failure and doesn't work here, then we can look back and go, all right, well, that's not the best cap hit, and that's a pretty, would like to have that 2027 3rd-round pick. But you know what? I give him credit for swinging for it. That's the thing. You got to take chances, and if that's the chance you take, it's a minor swing. I'm okay with that. I'm fine with that.
I mean, $2.75 million is not a huge cap hit. Let's be honest.
No, but if he's sitting on the bench,
that's the going rate. Yeah, it's a going rate for a 3rd pairing defenseman. It's less than they were paying for board. It's fine. That. I don't even buy necessarily that the Columbus was going to buy him out. I don't think that that's a factual thing where he had 2 years. They would have been paying 1.5 or close to it for the next 4 years to buy out a guy on a $2.75 million. That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
I don't think that was going to happen. I think that's overstating it from, people blogging in Columbus. And I also wouldn't give, the Columbus Blue Jackets coaching staff the benefit of the doubt either. Are they geniuses in Columbus? Are they having some fantastic year? Have they reinvented the wheel? No, maybe they don't know what they're doing and they didn't know how to coach this guy up into being a better player. Whereas, whoever was coaching the previous 2 years thought more highly of him. Who knows? I just don't
think... by the way, Peeke was selected out of Green Bay in the USHL, so not out of Selects Academy.
So, Mark Diver, I think it was, tweeted yesterday that he was talking to Adam McQuaid, and they had sent McQuaid videos of Peeke to look at before they traded for him to see what he thought. And, he thought he was worth going out and getting. And that's the kind of organizational communication, using all of your assets organizationally, your scouts, your development people, all that stuff that I love. And I think it's why they end up making a lot of good choices with these people, is because it's a consensus opinion. I don't think it's Don Sweeney and 1 or 2 guys deciding, this is what we need. I think they actually utilize everybody in that organization to make sure that they're making the right moves. And that's why a lot of these moves end up working out for them, and they bring in players that can help them. And I think Peeke could end up being one of those guys. I didn't expect, and I think we talked about it a lot on podcasts when I had you on, when you had me on. I've talked about it a lot with a lot of other people. I never expected this to be a big deadline for the Bruins. I did not think they were going to be getting big targets. I did not think they were going to be swinging for the fences. I did not think they were going to be going all in. I figured it was going to be a physical defenseman and a physical forward. And those were the 2 big needs that they were going to have to fill. They were not going to be able to fill every single need that they had. They were not going to be able to go all in like they did last year. They certainly weren't going to make Bruins fans happy with what they did, because Bruins fans always want to get the big ticket items, the Noah Hannafins, the Elias Lindholms, those kind of guys at the trade deadline. But I think they fit needs, and I think they gave this team exactly the extra physicality, heaviness, those kind of players that they needed to add at the deadline, and that this team needs for the playoffs. And I really like the Pat Maroon ad. Obviously he's not the player he was a few years ago. But like the off ice part of it with the winning pedigree that he has, with the personality, he's got a big personality. And I think the Bruins could use one or two more guys like that in their locker room, to play off Marchand and to be like part of that veteran leadership group to sort of add a little bit of a talkative, a little more like sort of fun element to that group. And I think he's the kind of guy that can do that. Not to mention he's going to be like Big Brother on the bench when he's healthy and playing, which they think is going to be towards the end of March after he had the early February back surgery. He's going to be like a Sean Thornton kind of presence where you're going to feel a little braver, a little more courageous because that guy's out there and he has your back, and he's going to chirp the other team, and he's going to put a little fear in the other team, and the other team's going to be thinking about him and worried about him and what he's going to do. He adds that element. The Bruins did not have enough players like that would have a fear intimidation factor in the other team, that the other team was worried about playing or created anxiety with the other team based on what they've done in the past and who they are as a player. Pat Maroon is that kind of guy. Even though he's probably only going to play 8-9 minutes a night, it's not going to be a big role. He can still put a puck in the net every once in a while. I think the fourth line certainly needs a presence like him. Veteran, big, physical, all of that stuff. Like, he's obviously probably going to step in, and Justin Brazeau is probably not going to play much once Maroon gets healthy, because this the same sort of player. Who knows? Maybe they play together with Boquist in the middle, but I think it's going to end up he's probably supplanting or replacing Brazeau in the lineup, and I don't think that's a bad thing for the playoffs. I want Pat Maroon in the lineup for the playoffs. I want him being a factor. He's going to make a big play for you in a big moment. He's going to go tell the other team's bench they're dead and they're in trouble at certain moments, like he did in 2019 in the Stanley Cup Finals with the Bruins and the Blues. And I love that move. They didn't have to give up much for him. Luke Toporowski is kind of a B prospect as far as I'm concerned. He's going home to play in Iowa, where he's from, with the AHL team for the Minnesota Wild. I think this is a good situation all around. And I like what they did. I think the Bruins viewed this as a kind of a transitional year with this team. They didn't get sucked into believing that this team is going to be like the favorite to win the Stanley Cup. I think the Florida Panthers are the favorite from the East to go the other way to the Stanley Cup final. And the Bruins will have a good run. I'd love to see what they're going to do battling the Panthers in the playoffs. But I think they made the right move and the right evaluation with this team as far as what they added and making sure they save all their bullets for this summer, where they're really going to be able to add a lot and really reload for the next few years.
Yeah, I was fine with this. Again, like, unless you were like I liked the three-way deal they had, the rumored deal for Lindholm. I was fine with that.
And something like that is probably where they were going to have moved Ullmark in order to create salary cap space. I don't want Bruins fans to think they were going to get a treasure trove of stuff for Linus Ullmark if they moved him to somewhere else. That was going to be a move to clear salary cap space to make another trade happen. That's why they were going to do that.
And it's hard to trade goalies at deadlines. That people trade values were low at this deadline. I mean, Foley didn't even net a first round pick. It's a 30-goal score. I think it was like a second and a fifth or something. But anyway, I mean, I just think like the Bruins they needed a top 4 left shot defenseman. They needed a top 6 center. You weren't getting both of those at this deadline. You were barely even going to be able to get one of them. So again, you enhance your strength. Your strength is goaltending and defense, and they got bigger and more physical. I'm good with that. I was fine. I'm happy with the Maroon deal. I wanted them to get him. I might have mentioned him to you a couple months ago, or a month or so ago. I know I mentioned him to Connor as like, hey, this is a guy that probably wouldn't cost you a ton, brings experience, and you nailed it, the Sean Thornton role. And I think that's good. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think even by the time he comes into the lineup, in late March, you can't tell me the fourth line is going to be solidified by then. Like, I think there will be time for him to kind of acclimate, and I'm fine with that. And then Peeke, we kind of discussed, again, you're taking a chance. You're taking a minor chance. I like that. They didn't go for, the Chris Tanev and spend a ton for him and things like that. They went for the guy who sort of like goes along with the Moneyball Bruins thing, where it's like, here's a guy with value we see that others don't, and we're going to try to tap into it. And I agree. It's funny. Diver said to me when they first got Peeke, he's like, I wonder how integral Adam McQuaid was in that, because of similar build and similar roles. And I was like, man, that's a snipe, Diver's got the sharp brain, which is great. But, to me, like, they're more physical and they're bigger. And, obviously Forbert's done for the year. So, Peeke kind of takes that spot.
Well, he does this year and beyond. He's the Forbort replacement moving forward too. That.
Well, yeah.
Part of the reason why they had to give up a 3rd round pick is because he's got term. He's got a couple of years after this,
exactly.
So you're going to have him for a while.
Exactly. And but again, to me, it goes back to I'm fine with the moves. I'm not like enthralled. Yeah. It wasn't like last time where I'm like, oh my God, you got so much better. Like you've added in so many places. It's fine. And I think I want to see I've said this to you a billion times. I want to see the goalie tandem in the playoffs. Not saying that they're going to win the cup because of it. I just want to see it. And you got a little more, the last couple playoff rounds, what's been the big thing? They're not physical enough. They're kind of getting pushed around. You helped yourself with Maroon and you helped yourself with Peeke. No one's expecting Maroon to put up a ton of points. People are like, oh my God, the Bruins are getting slower. The Bruins are already slow. Like, I mean, and I obviously, yes, I want them to play fast. And you've got guys like Richard waiting on the bench who can, provide some of that speed down there. Lauko can do that too. But, you need some more physicality as well. And I think they got that in Maroon. So it's a fine deadline. I'm not like, super pumped about it. I'm also not against it. It's like, all right, let's see what this team's got.
No, I think it was appropriate for the team that they have. And I think they made the right evaluation of this team, their ceiling, where they're at. Where they're at in the long-term view organizationally, where they're going to be at this summer. Like, I think they read the tea leaves correctly on this one. All right, tweet of the week for this week. Maddie, or actually, we're going to get into one thing real quick before we do that. Linus Ullmark not waiving his no trade, as reported by Kevin Weeks. And like purported to be a deal with the LA Kings. I think this was going to be like a Vitek Vanacek kind of trade. If they trade, it was going to be them trading him somewhere else for another goalie that was making less money, in order to create some salary cap space for them to make another move elsewhere. I think this was like another domino to drop.
Oh, you don't think they were going to get back like a first or anything?
No. Are you serious?
You don't think they would have?
No. For a goalie? No way. No. This is no. Did you see that reported anywhere that they're going to get back first?
No, I didn't. No. I was looking over. No. They have first for the next 2 years.
No. A goaltender is not going to give you a first-round pick. The goalie values in trades are not high at all.
Well, I know, but
I don't think it was going to be a first. I don't think it was going to be like a top prospect. I think it was going to be you were trading him somewhere, getting something back, probably another goalie, and maybe a pick of some kind. But it wasn't going to be a first-rounder. And it was going to be you're clearing salary cap off the books to make another move somewhere else. Like if Bruins fans think you were going to get some like really serviceable, very good young NHL player, a first round pick, like any of these things for Linus Ullmark when they were clearly trading him to try to create salary cap space for other moves they were making, no way, no freaking way.
I just think he's worth too much. Maybe I'm overrated.
He's worth too much to the Bruins. He's worth more to the Bruins than he is to anybody else. Maybe not this summer when they revisit the trade talks, when I think he will get moved because Brandon Bussey is going to need, I believe, waivers next year if you're trying to send him down, and they're probably going to lose him. And I think that factors into why they want to trade one of these goalies, because they want to extend Swayman. They don't want to lose Bussey. And I think the only way that all that's going to happen is if they trade Ullmark this summer, either this season or this summer, in order to avoid all those things happening, because they need to have cap space to devote towards Swayman and his new deal. And I think they want to groom Bussey to be the backup and sort of the next up-and-comer to Swayman as well. But they weren't ready to throw Bussey into the fire either the rest of this season. Like, if anything happened to Swayman and all of a sudden Bussey was the only guy in that, that would have been a terrible situation to throw him into. So they would have had another
2-0.
They would have had another veteran goalie coming back in that Ullmark deal. I'm convinced of it. But I don't think it was going to be any major haul. And I have zero issues with Ullmark not waiving his no trade. It's something he agreed to. It's something the Bruins agreed to. He has a young family that he did not want to go cross country and leave for a couple of months. I think, the Bruins, it's their absolute strength. I'm against the goalie rotation. I don't want to see the goalie rotation every other game in the playoffs. I think Swayman deserves to get the start in game one and see what he can do with it and get the ball with it and run with it for a while, like Ullmark has had the last couple of years. But I understand and respect the opinion of people like you that want to see that goalie rotation at work and to see what they're going to do if they use that theory and make it reality in the playoffs.
I agree. It's interesting, the Ullmark trade thing. Goalies typically don't get a lot, especially at the deadline, because it's hard for goalies to acclimate to a new place. If he goes to New Jersey, right? It's March. Like is he going to be his worst defense, worst team?
I think honestly, Evan, I think it's more that the NHL views goalies like they view relief pitchers in baseball, and they view running backs in football, where they're eminently replaceable. Every GM believes they have a goalie, or they can pick somebody up off the street that could do 80 to 90% of what the goalie they're going to trade for is going to do. I think there's a belief out there that there's very few special like goalies that can play 60 plus games, like be these elite goaltenders, the Vasilevskis of the world, and everybody else is pretty equal. And there's a bunch of guys in the AHL who are just as good as the guys that are in the NHL. And I think that's why you don't see a lot of high value trade value for goalies when it comes to trade time.
You're right. And you look at the Vegas Golden Knights last year win with like their fifth string goalie in Aiden Hill, and now he's nasty. Like now he's putting up great numbers. I just look at Ullmark more as palatable contract under contract for another year.
Yep.
And coming off a Vezina trophy, and he's relatively young. So I look at that more as like, okay, I could maybe see a desperate team. But again, there was other goalies on the market. You look at New Jersey, they had Jake Allen. Like they went a different direction because it goes back to what you were saying. So, hopefully the Bruins get a first round pick or something like that for Ullmark around the draft. We'll see. In terms of, I'm fine with him waiving the no trade clause. And I said at the top of the show, like I am interested to see, he mentioned last night or Saturday about how it's kind of an emotional week for him.
Yeah.
And it's been a hard week. I mean, it's got to be crazy. I mean, you're like, all right, where am I going? What am I getting dealt for? Like, when are they going to call me? Like, you're waiting for the phone to ring.
Especially when you have young kids. If you have a young family, I think it's extra stressful. For a guy like DeBrusk, I think it's stressful because he stresses about those things. But he doesn't have a wife. He doesn't have kids. He could pick up and go somewhere else tomorrow, like go to Calgary or wherever tomorrow, and he'd be okay. With Ullmark, it's a little bit of a different story when you have young kids in school and you're talking about maybe you're not going to see them for a couple of months. Like that's a much more different situation.
It'd be like if I was like, all right, Haggs, we've traded you to Winnipeg. You're going to be covering the Jets for the rest of the year. You cool with that? Like, it's the same type. You have two young kids, all that. Whereas me, I mean, I wouldn't want to go cover the Winnipeg Jets, but okay, I could go pick up and move there.
Yep.
But to me, like, I am interested to see what the after effects are of this. And I think the big one is he just going to be insanely good down the stretch, And I think like, that's where, this is kind of, he's not getting dealt. He knows he's here for the rest of the year. The team wants him, mentioned the McAvoy text, Bergeron texting him. And, again, like, does he probably love Don Sweeney right now? Probably not. But again, there's a reason Sweeney doesn't directly coach the team. He's moving the players around. So, again, I want them to trade Ullmark at this deadline unless they were going to get a haul that would help you for here and now, which again clearly wasn't probably going to happen in the long run. But it's their strength. It's their one strength. That's the one thing they hold above every other team is they have two like top 10 starters in the NHL. And that you have that over everybody. You don't have the best decor. That's like either Vegas or whomever, not the Bruins. You don't have the best top six in the league. You do have two really good goalies, and I kind of like, and maybe this is just because they didn't have the assets, but I like that they didn't try to compete with teams like the Hurricanes and the Panthers and the Lightning for scoring. Instead, they said, no, we're going to beef up to defend those teams. We're going to beef up to knock those teams around rather than, hey, let's try to compete with them and get scores as well and try to outscore them. They're not outscoring anybody. They're not.
No, not this year.
It goes back to what we said earlier. Their defense first, their goaltending first. So, I'm fine with it. I'm whatever. This is going to sound really stupid, and I'm going to get crap for this. Whatever happens with this team. I think that's kind of been my outlook on this team the whole year. Both of us going into the year thought they were, low tier playoff team, and they've exceeded that.
Wild card. And I think they're going to end up being better than that. So they've already surpassed what I thought they were going to be this year. So like, you add a little bit to help them in areas where they could use it, in areas where typically you haven't, I think Don Sweeney has figured out that what you need to add at the playoff time is like those kind of players, heavy, physical, tougher players, playoff style players. And I think he's understanding now that that's really what's important come playoff time and deadline time, is to add those kind of, veteran guys, good locker room guys, like all that stuff is what's the most important. A lot of the flashy players that you move at the deadline don't necessarily they're not difference makers.
No.
For a lot of those teams. And that's just the way it goes.
And think of all the locker room stuff they've lost in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Foligno, Bergeron, Krejci, those are hard guys to replace. And I know some fans are just like, oh, it doesn't matter. It matters on the ice. No, the locker room matters. Like the stuff, what happens in the dressing room, that matters. And I think you saw it in 2011. You've seen it in the years since. That stuff mattered. So, Maroon brings a little bit of that.
All right. Tweet of the week from Maddie Delude 96 on Twitter /X. And, could it be the worst branding for X of all time if everybody still just calls it Twitter and tweets and all that?
I will always call it Twitter.
Everybody just ignores Elon Musk's egomaniacal X brand change. All right. Maddie Delude 96. Hopefully Jack has a nice large pizza for Pat Maroon at his locker when he shows up. I can report that I don't believe there was a pizza at Pat Maroon's locker when he did show up yesterday and talk to the media before he went in and met his new teammates. But I'm fascinated to watch if there's like Jack, Pat Maroon interactions. And this is going to be similar to, when Benoit Pouliot played for the Canadians and Jack was all over him, like torched him.
Remember that.
I think he fought David Krejci and he like torched Pouliot at the time, saying he was like, forget if he said he was a coward or what he said, but he was like all over him, or like a huge disappointment because he was a high first round pick.
You know what he did?
That's what it was.
He went, I think it was Johnny Boychuk was coming from behind the net, and Pouliot like jumped into him and tried to just hit his head, and he missed. And Ferentz noticed it, went over and fought him. And during that fight, I think was when Jack was just like, but I think there was a Krejci fight too in there as well.
Yeah. So I am mega interested to see like how much of a Pat Maroon fanboy Jack Edwards becomes now that he's a member of the Bruins. This is going to be hilarious to listen to and to watch, is to see how like it's gonna be a 180-degree turn for Jack as far as Pat Maroon goes.
It's going to be like when George Costanza gets fired and then goes into work on Monday, quits, and then goes into work on Monday like he never quit. And it's going to be like Jack being like, oh, I've always loved Pat Maroon.
Yeah.
My theory, and they'll never do this, Nesson of all places especially will never do this, but I would love, Maroon's out for a bit, bring him up.
Put him in the booth.
Put him in the booth for a period. Let him talk. Let him have fun. These games coming up, I'm not saying they're not interesting, but you could, the deadline's over. They pretty much nearly locked up the second spot in the Atlantic. You're probably playing the Leafs in the first round. Let them go back and forth. It might be really good. It might be awkward. Either way, it's great content. And if you want to keep Brick there as like a mediator, whatever. And my guess is they would be fine and then throw a couple of jokes around and be fine.
There's no way they're gonna like tell Brick to take a powder while Pat Maroon's in there with Jack. I'm pretty sure Jack needs Brick now to be his co-pilot through all these situations. So Brick will definitely be there. But I think that's a great idea. I think you're doing Nesson's programming for them. They're coming up with their programming ideas. Evan, I think
great. That's a good one. It would be great. I mean, they have Chara in the booth the other night, which I thought was funny. And
some players during Marchand's 1000th game, like they've had a bunch of those guys come in and do that stuff.
Yeah, and I think it's good. Like, obviously it's tough with hockey because it's always moving, and you do need to Chara was in there when Frederick's breakaway went in, and Jack's kind of interrupt him. Like, it's not like baseball where you can put Bill Burr in the booth for like 2 innings and they can just shoot the what.
Yep.
But I think having Maroon in there, people are watching the game anyway, but I think it'd be fun. Or if you really want to have some extra content, have him sit down and do an interview or talk back and forth. Like, do something with it. Don't avoid it because people want to see it, and it's all in good fun. Nobody thinks like Pat Maroon's gonna lift Jack up by his pants or anything like that. Like, it's gonna be fine. Do it. It's that time of year to do it. So I'm for it.
That time of year. I absolutely agree, Evan. Pucks with Haggs has been powered by Prize Picks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network. Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America and the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports instead of battling thousands of other players that could be pros or sharks. You simply pick more or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll right in. For instance, you could do more or less David Pastrnak shots on net, Charlie McAvoy block shots. I'm sure you can do Linus Ullmark saves. All kinds of different categories that you can do, and have your favorites that you go to again and again, and to try to clean up. It's fun and pretty simple. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. That's download the Prize Picks app today, which is super easy to use, and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy, as Evan waves around the phone with the app on it. I love that.
I've got the app. It makes it fun. Why not?
Absolutely. Thank you very much for joining us today, Evan, on Pucks with Haggs podcast. Everybody out there, thanks for listening. We'll see you at the rink.